This is a meeting of the Athens Board of Zoning Appeals. It's October the 14th, 2008. The City of Athens and the Athens City Board of Zoning Appeals support the Americans with Disabilities Act. Anyone needing special accommodation may make such a request at this time. It is a few minutes after 7, and at this time I'll call the meeting to order. The board consists of 5 members and 2 alternates. The alternates take full part in the discussion and become voting members in the absence of a member or when a member abstains for a conflict of interest. Present tonight are John Gulsey, Joan Kranansky, Lisa Carson. Greg Lavelle is going to be here, but he'll be just a little bit late. I'm Betty Hollow, acting chair. And we also have with us Paul Eschenbacher from the Code Office, who is our acting secretary. The board operates according to the following procedure. The chair will name and describe the case. The zoning administrator will state the basis of the objection and any applicable facts or conditions pertaining to the case. The appellant or their representative will give reasons why the appeal should be viewed favorably. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the request will be heard. Anyone wishing to speak in general comment will be heard. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition will be heard. If necessary, the appellant or their representatives will offer concluding summary or rebuttal remarks. Then testimony from the floor will be closed and the board will deliberate and render a decision. According to the Athens City Code, section 230703B, the board has the power to grant variances from the strict application of the code, provided the variance will not be contrary to the public interest, the spirit of the code is observed, public safety and welfare are secured, and substantial justice is done. According to Athens City Code 230910C, variances from the code shall not be granted unless the board finds, based on direct specific findings of fact, that each of the following conditions has been supported. First, practical difficulty and undue hardship. Because of exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions pertaining to a specific piece of property, a literal enforcement of these regulations will result in a practical difficulty or undue hardship that is unnecessary for the achievement of public purposes. Exceptional circumstances. There are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property in question or to the intended use of the property that do not apply generally to other properties or classes or uses in the same zone. Preservation of equal property rights. Literal interpretation of these regulations would deprive the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same zone and the same vicinity, while a granting of the requested variance will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied to other properties in the same zone and the same vicinity. Minimum variance. The variance granted is the minimum variance required to make possible the reasonable use of the property. Absence of detriment. The authorizing of such variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not materially impair the purpose of the zoning code or the purpose public interest. Not of a general nature. The condition or situation of the specific piece of property or the intended use of said property for which variance is sought, one or the other in combination, is not of so general or recurrent a nature as to make reasonably practicable the formulation of a general regulation for such condition or situation. The board also has the power to review decisions of the zoning administration where an error is alleged, hear requests for conditionally permitted uses, hear requests for substitution of non-conforming uses, determine the number of required off-street parking spaces if the specific use is not contained in section 2311 table B, hear requests for temporary use of structures or premises, consider requests for extension of temporary permits after receiving a recommendation from the Athens City Planning, to hear requests for business use variances after receiving a recommendation from the Athens City Planning Commission, and hear requests for variance from the strict application of the City Code Title 25, Flood Damage Prevention. Any person, resident or officer, department, or appointed body of the City of Athens aggrieved by a decision of the board may petition the Athens County Court of Common Pleas concerning the illegality of the decision. Such petition must be filed within 30 days after the mailing of the decision of the board to the applicant. We only have two cases tonight. They are case 0824B in Zone B2. It's out on 488 Richland Avenue with Dave Hosinger is the appellant. The second case is 0826V, 21 Kurt Street. It's in Zone R3, and Dan DeLuca is the appellant. The board is required to take testimony under oath, so if anyone who is wishing to speak tonight concerning any item on the agenda would please stand and swear or affirm that any testimony you present to the board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Do you so swear? Thank you. So our first case is 488 Richland Avenue. The appellant is requesting a variance from Section 230313I3 to allow placement of a permanent freestanding sign 5 feet from a business lot where 10 feet is the required minimum. And Mr. Eschenbacher will give us some background, please.
Just for the audio record, my name is Paul Eschenbacher. I'm a code officer with the City of Athens, Ohio. The first case tonight is pretty straightforward. As Mr. Hoisington explained in his letter, he already has a base for the sign. There's already one existing that he's put his sign into. It's 5 feet from the neighboring property line. There's nothing in our code that specifically gives a reason why for the 10-foot rule, but I've looked in a couple other sign ordinances for other cities, and they explain the main reason for that is so that businesses don't accidentally or on purpose put their signs right up against each other. It's for maximum exposure for each sign. Mr. Hoisington's sign placement is within the ball controls in all other areas. This is the only one that sticks out.
So the sign that is now right there is going to be the one that's going to stay, right? Or is
I think so. You can ask Mr.
Yeah.
Hoisington to make sure. Yeah.
Other questions from Mr. Eschenbacher? All right. Thank you. Would you like to speak? Be sure to tell us your name and address as you come up.
Hi, I'm Dave Hoisington. The address we're talking about is 488 Richland Avenue, which is my office. There was a wellhead from an older sign, which was much bigger and lighted, and it's been a real estate office for years. That's what it is now. I just basically wanted something there so that if I'm telling somebody to come to my office, they can. It's a little more obvious than looking at the front of the building. The office next door does not use anywhere near that side of the property. I put in my letter, and I know they don't care. And I've had a couple of the neighbors come over after the code letter went out and said, "What are they talking about?" And they didn't even notice or care. So, any questions for me?
Yeah, the question I asked Paul, is this a sign that you're going to keep the way
Yes,
as it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly the size and yeah.
I was there, and there was a minivan was parked next to it, and you could not see the sign
Right.
from going north, I guess. So
Yeah.
you may want to consider pushing it up a little bit.
Yeah, it's good enough for right now, and I appreciate that. But as far as I'm concerned, right now it's permanent. If I want to change it, I'll revisit the situation here.
Other comments or questions?
Well, I have a few questions. I was counting the number of parking places you had in front of your building.
Okay.
The one on the very north side, which would be towards Court Street. There's no white line in the edge, so that's next to the sign. Is that considered a parking place?
Yes.
Okay. So then, altogether, there would be 7 parking places?
Well, there are actually more than that. I just made some lines. Basically, there's a temp office next to me on the other side from where the sign is, and they have a lot of traffic in and out, and they tend to park right in front of my office. And so I put those lines basically to tell them, that those go with that building. My property actually goes almost to their building, and there's a gravel driveway up between them, so there's really probably 8 or 10 spots if you use that. But
I guess I need to ask this question. In reading your statement, Well, I looked at various signs along that route, and there's a difficult place in some of those lots for signs, and I noticed that many people had overhang signs that came out over their front door area, and they were a little bit larger, and then they hung down, and they really were much more visible.
Yeah.
And considering that we have visibility problem with the sign, which is what I thought also, because it sat so far back from the road.
Well, the problem is that it's not very easy to have an overhang coming from, because you're gonna lose a one space, you know. And the problem with this whole rule of the Richland Avenue is that 10 feet, you're gonna lose one space. In my own property, I had to have 20 feet away in the pole and then have an overhang to the street, and that's quite a bit of a structure. That you
Well, these were attached to the building, so they weren't, there was no pole involved. This was
just
not a
the building.
pole
Yeah,
issue.
yeah.
There were several people that, I think at least the log cabin place, I can't think specifically.
That's my place.
Oh, that's your place. Several places that had just coming off of the top of the building, you know, with maybe a pyramid frame that
Yeah.
supported it with it hanging up, which was much more visible than
Yeah.
this sign.
Yeah.
And if, as you state, this is just barely conspicuous enough to even be of benefit to me,
Right. Well,
I don't know why the sign then, if it's...
Yeah.
Well, basically, I mean, I appreciate all your input on trying to help me get more noticed, but I think that's what we're doing, and that's not really my point. You don't get a whole lot of, with the real estate business these days with the internet, you don't get a whole lot of people just driving by thinking, oh, I'll stop. The sign is more to get people to, you know, watch for the sign, tell them where my office is when I'm talking to them, and then they come. And basically, the big roof-mounted extending signs, I just basically, economics, the way they are, I didn't want to spend $5,000, $6,000 on a sign, and that's what they cost. If you have one of those big roof-mounted pole, you know, horizontal pole. So, if the problem, I guess what I'm saying is that if the problem is with the sign placement for code, if that's what you're suggesting, we'll deal with that. If you're suggesting ideas for better visibility, I appreciate that, but I don't really want to do that. So,
I also noticed that you had the same sign, I think it was the identical sign, in terms of appearance and lettering, both on the north and south side of your building.
that's,
Is
yeah,
that-
that was a temporary thing, but yes, they are still there, I forgot about that. They're a
Okay.
little smaller, actually.
Okay.
Same lettering, but just a little smaller size.
Okay, well, it was really hard to tell.
Yeah. Basically, there were windows there previously, and they'd been covered up, and it looked like a window frame, and I just put those there kind of to fill in the window frame. They were really just more to fill in the space than they were for signage.
Other things? Okay. You could sit down a minute and we'll see if there's anybody, there are not too many people here that are going to speak, so, okay, I'm not really
If you say something
expecting a
about mine,
whole...
I'm going to say something about it. Thank you.
Okay, anybody who wishes to speak in agreement? Anybody who wishes to speak in general comment? Anybody who's proposing to speak against? Okay, so do you have anything else to tell us?
No, thank you.
So you don't really need a rebuttal. And I'm assuming that if there is a problem with the signs on the building, and I understand, I think that you're allowed one freestanding sign and probably one identification sign, and so if you need to take something down off the building, I'm assuming that the code office will let you know that.
That might be a question for Mr. Reichenbacher.
Exactly.
I actually forgot the little signs were there. Do I need to sort of...
I think you're allowed to have an identification sign on the building, but probably one, but he can tell you that. Okay. So at this point, I think we will close the discussion, or rather the comments from the floor, and see what the board has to say, okay? So, do you want to talk about this before we go through the findings, or you just want to talk about it as we go through the findings?
As we go.
All right, here we go. Practical difficulty and undue hardship. Yes. Ah, I always forget that. Yes, how about a motion?
Go ahead.
I move in case 08-24V 488 Richland Avenue, Dave Hosington, appellant. Appellant is requesting a variance from Section 23.03.13 to allow placement of a permanent freestanding sign 5 feet from a business lot where 10 feet is the required minimum.
Second.
Okay, now we'll try to start the findings. So the first one is practical difficulty and undue hardship, and it says, because of exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions pertaining to a specific piece of property, a literal enforcement of the regulations will create a practical difficulty or undue hardship that is unnecessary to the achievement of public purposes. So is there some exceptional or extraordinary circumstance?
Well, yes, it is, because first of all, the lot is small, and then the 10-foot rule will deprive a person to lose of one space, actually.
Okay.
And it's a difficulty for all the properties in the neighborhood. And so I think in this case, if we move it back, it would improve the parking space.
Okay. And the appellant did say that it would end up in the middle of the parking lot.
Yeah, it does,
So
yeah.
that would, as you say, remove parking. Exceptional circumstances, there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property in question or to the intended use of the property that do not apply generally to other properties or classes or uses in the same zone.
Well, the base of the sign's already there.
Well, okay, so
Pre-existing,
it has
that's
been,
an
it has had a sign
exception.
there for quite a long time. This building seems to be particularly close to its neighboring business. Is that true? Or at least your parking lot?
It's actually not terribly close on that side.
Okay, your parking lot.
It's closer on the other side.
Okay, close on the other side. Okay. So yes, that's not part of the exceptional circumstance then. Anything else you want to add to that you think is exceptional about this?
Well, some of my issues with this are that I think West Virginia Electric has the same situation. They have a sign up there, probably grandfathered in. You know, I saw that. But if we want to change some of these options, then I think people need to follow through. And I understand difficult circumstances. I mean, I spent a lot of time driving down the street looking at how people put their signs and what works and what doesn't. But the house next door, which is still, whatever business is in it at the point, it's still a very nice house. Could become a rental. There's 2 big spotlights on that sign shining down, I think appropriately as to what the code claims. I mean, they can't shine out at the street, they can't shine this way.
Sure.
But under those circumstances, that was one of the drawbacks I saw of that sign being there, because if we grant it and then that's been granted,
That's
that
true.
sign can stay there.
Right.
And that house is in very nice condition on the
So
outside.
you're saying that the sign has spotlights that shine on the house?
Could, I'm not sure that they shine on the house. You can't tell how they're
Okay.
shining, right? So,
Okay.
and it could interfere with somebody living in that house, as opposed to somebody that has a business would shut down at 5 o'clock, right?
Sure.
Wouldn't make any difference.
Right. And
that was
again,
really one of the
I would
concerns.
assume that is an issue that the code office can deal with, because it's my understanding that you can't have your lights on a sign just shining anywhere willy-nilly, can you?
That's correct.
That is correct.
So once again, it would be an issue that we would hope to bring to the code office's attention, and that people who might be living there could certainly come to the code office and say, he's got to redirect his lights.
Well, I think if we allow the sign to
Yeah,
stay
I
there,
understand what
then
you're
all
saying.
those issues have to be addressed later.
That's
So
right.
that's my concern.
Yeah, okay. Let's look at preservation of equal property rights. Literal interpretation of these regulations would deprive the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same zone in the same vicinity, while a granting of the requested variance will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied to other properties in the same zone and the same vicinity.
Well, there are several businesses that the sign is right on the borderline, as it is now, including my next door neighbor, so.
Okay, so
We're not
it would be
granting
equal
any
to-
more privilege to him than anybody
than
else.
some others have.
Although about 10 years ago, there was I talked to Paul a bit about it, that they were all supposed to come into compliance,
Yes,
but that hasn't happened yet, so
Right.
we're waiting for that.
right. What about that?
As soon as the code office receives a new deadline as to when all signs will come in compliance, we'll get after them.
So what
No
happens?
specific. The last I heard, and I might be misspeaking here, was that city council extended the deadline. But I am not aware of any specific deadline right now.
So what happens to those who did get a variance for
They
their
have a
sign?
variance.
So they have a variance.
So then they're just non-conforming.
Yeah.
Okay, minimum variance, the variance granted is the minimum variance required to make possible the reasonable use of the property.
Yeah, it's 5 foot is minimum, I think.
Okay. Absence of detriment, the authorizing of such a variance will not be in substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not materially impair the purpose of the zoning code or the public interest.
See, that's where my objection lies. I wasn't sure about.
That you're not sure about this detriment. that could-
Exactly.
that could
So I
occur.
think that, and if we have this whole other issue going on, and then we grant a variance, and then the new regulations come into effect with the deadline date, then
On the
Yeah.
other hand, the sign is smaller than what they're allowed to have, which is 50 square feet, I believe, or
40 square feet.
50, I believe.
50.
Yeah, and it's really very minimal.
Yeah.
I did
it's
see it.
minimal
Yeah,
sign.
Yeah.
it's very minimal.
Yeah. Well, the last thing is not of a general nature. The condition or situation of the specific piece of property or the intended use of said property for which the variance is sought is not of so general or current a nature as to make reasonably practicable the formulation of a general regulation for such condition or situation. And in fact, we already have a sign ordinance, and in this case, we're being asked to give people relief from the regulations of that ordinance. So, anything else you want to say? Okay. Ready to vote? Should we start with Mr. Lavelle?
I vote yes.
Ms.
I would
Nichols?
yes too.
Ms. Kranz?
no.
Yes. Okay, and I'm going to vote yes as well, but with the proviso that I do understand the things that you said and appreciate those comments. So you will have your variance, and you can continue to have your sign. So let's move on to our next case, which is Case 0826V, zone is R3, it's at 21 Kurt Street, and Dan DeLuca is the appellant. So if we can get, let's see what the issue is here. He's requesting a variance from section 230805C to construct a parking lot with 5 parking spaces without paving it, where indeed the requirement is for it to be paved, so.
In your information packets, you should have the letter of recommendation from the Shade Tree Commission that the appellant be allowed to have a permeable surface on the parking lot. There's been a question about the number of parking spaces that is requested and how many are allowed there and stuff. I have a copy of the rental permit application that Mr. DeLuca submitted, and he's asking for 5 tenants at the house, so only 5 parking spaces are needed. The discrepancy is when Mr. DeLuca did his measuring, and then when the code office did ours, it's the opinion of the code office that there isn't enough maneuvering room for the number of parking spaces that he claims can be on there. One of the code officers, Lance Allison, drove a car back there, marking off where the spaces were, and he thought there was inadequate parking space. So we said that there were officially 5 parking spaces back there, which is all that they would need anyway. But that's the discrepancy between the number of spaces.
Okay, but he is now asking for 5 with 5 tenants in total.
That's right. And of course, if this all goes through and they happen to park a 6th car back there, we don't care. If more people that can park off the street without causing hassles
I
to
guess
others,
the
it's
issue
fine.
is whether
It's
the,
officially 5.
yeah, but if the extra car means an extra tenant, then,
If that happens, then yeah, then there's a problem. But-
okay, so we're not hoping that happens.
Yeah.
Okay. So the issue is really whether this lot is to be parked or not, and
Yeah, that's
code
the only,
says it should
that's
be-
the only variance
should be
request
paved,
right
is what I'm
now.
trying to say.
As you can see from the Shade Tree Commission, they've made recommendations about landscaping and so forth, and this is the only discrepancy about following the rules, so.
Okay. Questions? Okay. property?
Oh, quick question, Paul.
Oh, yeah.
I went back and did some measurements, and I was trying to figure out, is this drawing, well, there's two drawings. One has the old parking places in it, but the other one, I think the numbers are the same. The rear of the property, when I measured it, I didn't quite get the total number of feet that's showing on the rear of the property here. I was about 4 feet short, or 5 feet short, and then when I measured the driveway, at least 6 inches of that gravel driveway goes beyond the 10 feet that it states is between the end of the house and the end of the property. Or is there a setback there? I mean, I don't know, I was having a hard time figuring it out.
Well, the measurements that we did coincided with Mr. DeLuca, but you could ask him about any discrepancies.
Okay. Okay, so the code office you had the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
Instead of our code officer, Allison, was down there doing all the measurements and all the testing of the vehicles.
Anything else for Mr. Eschenbacher? Thank you. Mr. DeLuca? Okay. And can you state your name and address, please, for the record?
My name's Dan DeLuca, 15 Dove Drive in Athens. Basically, pretty much what everything that Paul said is what this is about. Is it's pretty much going for a variance to have gravel as opposed to paving it. After talking to the tree commission, they just felt that it would actually be beneficial for the tree growth as well, not having the paving to prevent any further damage down the road as far as the trees are concerned, that type of thing. And as far as the code office, we were talking about it, and it seems like the water table down there has been a problem with flooding on the streets and that type of thing, and they thought that this would help prevent that as well. And pretty much that's our stance on it.
Is there any chance that you could maybe possibly pave like maybe 10, 15 feet in the front where there's from the entrance is?
Like the driveway area?
So that those gravel
Yeah,
won't
part of
be
it's
thrown out of
actually
there.
already has paving there, but yeah, I mean,
No,
that's...
I mean, it comes right, I took a picture in here, it comes right to the sidewalk. And then if you could beyond that, maybe pave a little bit so that the gravel won't be thrown to the street.
Right, yeah, that's...
Could we make that a part of it, maybe the variance?
Right.
Okay.
Anything else you want to ask or comments you want to make, Mr. DeLuca?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Now, the tree commission is recommending 2 trees, front or back, or where?
Right.
Okay.
Actually, I counted more than that. I count 3 trees that they're asking you to plant.
Right.
Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
I believe it's 2 in addition to what's there, my understanding.
It's 3 in addition. Let's just be sure, because we probably will put that in the motion to be sure that that's in the record about where they should be. They say 2 large shade trees are required at 20 oak. The silver maple is 1. It's suggested that the other large shade trees should be planted at the front of the property. There's 1. In the second instance, at 22 oak, you already have the 2 trees, so you don't need anything in addition. 2 large trees are required
Right.
at 21, 1 in the front and 1 at the rear, and it doesn't appear that either one of those is now in place, right? So you need 3 trees total.
Right.
Okay. And they will, of course, have to be of a certain size, a minimum 1.5-inch diameter at breast height, and come from a state-certified nursery, protected from vehicles by wheel stops, and various other things. And I should just read this little paragraph. The Shade Tree Commission is very concerned about trying to retain rainwater at these sites in order to promote the growth of trees and the tree canopy of the city of Athens. And they wanted to convey to us their backing for this appeal. And again, as you say, there is flooding, and there is, if you don't have a permeable surface, it's just going to wash off, and the trees won't get much water in.
Right.
So that's the rationale there. Okay. Anything else?
Well, I fully support the gravel parking area, but in spending some time back there, I guess I'd like to feel assured that these trees are somewhat in place before you get the variance, and with some buffers. Because even though maybe we want to put 6 cars in there, so you're going to need...
Well, yeah, my drawing, if you look at it, is showing the buffer in the back, and according to what the tree commission was telling me, that's what they were after. They'd really like to see one in the front of the house too, as well.
Yeah.
But there's no room in the front really to put the trees that they're requiring, do you think?
Well, they said.
They told me you
large shade
could,
tree
I
and
mean,
planted in the front of 20
I'm not a
Oak
tree
Street.
expert, so I can't really confirm that one way or the other, but
Well, they're
according to them, they
suggesting one
said...
in the front of 20 Oak Street, so they seem to think you can put one there.
Right, or either or.
Well, it says,
I saw
it
that,
is
yeah.
suggested that the other large shade trees should be planted at the front of the property.
Right.
And again, I think...
So I'd assume that means it is okay, because they went out there and checked it all out
Okay,
as
all
well.
right. And then, what did they say? Sweet Gum, second house, you have no problem. At Kurt Street, one shall be planted at the front and one at the
One in
rear. And I
back,
think
right.
what they're trying to do literally is to supply shade.
Right,
That's really what it's
right,
all about.
right.
So, one in the front, one in the back, then you get shade from the heat of the sun and then...
Right.
So what kind of barriers would you put up to protect the tree in the rear? I'm assuming unless you put them both in the front, but...
As far as, I mean, they really didn't give me any guidance on as far as what type of barriers you would need. I mean, obviously, like a cement,
It
type-
said they should be protected from vehicles by wheel stops.
Right.
Wheel stop.
like a parking curb or something to that
Curbing or
effect.
other means to protect vehicles from damaging the trees. Trees planted at the front of the property or where people would be walking should be free of branches to at least 6 feet. Okay. The buffering requirements of Title 3706 must be met by the owners of 20 and 22 Oak Street and 21 Kurt Street unless agreed otherwise with their neighbors as described in Title 3706. So if you're going to put in curbing or wheel stops, then somehow you have to get your neighbors to agree to that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Okay, I may be done.
You don't have to be.
No, I know, but I'm saying that.
I guess I have a question. I wonder why, if these other Oak Street properties are involved, why they're not listed on the adjoining properties and owners.
Mr. DeLick would have to answer that.
What's the question?
Just, there's a list of adjoining properties and owners that comes with the packet. And I'm just wondering who the owners are of 20 and 22 Oak Street, since they seem to be involved.
That's
They're
I
yours
own
property.
this
They're all
property as well,
yours?
yes.
Okay.
But the parking for all three properties is at Kurt Street, is that?
No,
No.
no.
Okay, all right. So somehow
They're
you've got to have
three
trees.
separate parcels.
Okay. All right, so it's the parking for Kurt Street, but the trees go with the...
Right, it's still the same
Okay.
concept, because it's
Okay.
all the gravel or not, pretty
Okay.
much. They're like right next, street over from each other, pretty much.
Okay.
So do they butt back end, backyard to backyard?
Yeah, 2022 Oak, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yes. Side to side.
And so you're gonna, So is that gonna be one continuous gravel
On 20
pile?
and 22 Oak, yes, but 21 Kurtz is a separate.
Okay, and you already have variances for or do they not
No,
have?
today's just 21 Kurtz is all I came in here for.
Okay.
But it's pretty much, when we went to the tree commission, all three of them were heard at the same time, because it's all pretty much the same issue with all, with all three of them.
But we're not hearing the Oak Street ones tonight,
Not that
correct?
I mean, today's pretty much 21 Kurtz is all I know of.
So we're really talking here about 6 trees for the 3 properties,
Right,
some of which you already have.
right,
Okay. 3 of which you already have.
right.
Okay, anything else? No? Okay, we'll see if this,
Thank you.
there's no one here to quarrel with you. Ms. Eschenbacher, did you want to add anything else? Okay. So we need to have a motion, and I think it should include the condition that these trees be added at the specific properties.
I was hoping for maybe 10 feet of paving in the front, just by the
Okay,
entrance.
so add that as condition, but I think we need to put in here
Yeah, 3
that he
as-
will have to add 1 tree, there will be 2 trees at each property.
Mhm.
And in the case of 20 Oak Street, he must add 1, and in the central property, he doesn't need any, he's got to. But those two need to be maintained, and they make that very
Right.
specific. If one of them dies, he's got to put another one in. Okay.
Total of what, 3 or 2? now?
Well,
It says.
okay, he needs to have 2 trees at 20 Oak Street. He has 1, he will need to add 1. He has 2 trees at 22 Oak Street,
But we're
so,
not discussing those.
No,
just
we're only
discussing-
doing-
except they are conditions of this
As a part of
variance.
the- okay.
From my perspective, they are.
Mhm.
Because we are taking the shade tree's word for it, that it should be gravel, and their understanding is it should be gravel so that we can add to the canopy and protect the shade, offer more shade in Athens. Right? So I think it should be part of those variants. So we need a motion.
Betty, will he will have to come back for those Oak Street properties though, then, and also if he wants to do gravel.
If the variance goes for Kurt Street, yeah, I take it that this is a package deal. Is that right? That you agree now to this?
Right.
Well, I can't do that unless I've seen him, and I did not realize that since the variance just stated a specific address.
Well,
And what if he
That's
sells the
okay.
property to somebody, and that goes with the property, I guess?
yeah, it would go with the property. The parking lot is only for Kurt Street.
Correct.
The addition of the trees is a necessary condition for the gravel
Right,
at Kurt Street.
correct.
Right.
Okay, I'm good on that.
Yeah, so I'm
Okay.
just taking it as a deal, a package.
Okay, but not the Oak Street ones.
The trees go
Just
with
the
the Oak
trees.
Street as well as the others, if he's to have a gravel parking lot at Kurt Street. He's not asking for a variance for those others.
Right, I know that.
I'm just adding
I know, you're
condition-
making sure that-
I'm adding conditions to his getting gravel anywhere. Right.
Okay,
So the variance is to have gravel with the condition that the front part of the lot be paved to keep the gravel from spilling out,
right.
and that these trees are added to the 3 properties that he owns
Okay.
that are close to each other. Does that make sense?
Right,
But, yeah, if he's adding more condition, which would be, probably more difficult for him, but we should be okay, I think.
okay,
Because the variance now requires more conditions.
okay.
Well, adding 3 trees is cheaper
Yeah.
than adding asphalt, isn't it? So,
Or concrete.
okay, so have we got a motion?
I'll make one.
Okay.
I move to grant the variance from Section 230805C to the property at 21 Kurtz Street to construct a parking lot with 5 parking spaces without paving it, where the requirement is for it to be paved with the condition that the trees be planted per recommendation of the Tree Commission for properties, on properties of 21, 20, and
It's 2022 and 21.
and
You're
20,
right.
20, 21, and 22, and also with the condition that the 10 feet from the sidewalk into the entrance of the parking space to be paved.
Is that agreeable? Okay.
I second.
All right, let us look. Practical difficulty and undue hardship. Because of the exceptional or extraordinary circumstances pertaining to this piece of property, a literal enforcement of the regulations will result in practical difficulty and undue hardship that is unnecessary to the achievement of the public purposes. And we are remembering that the Shade Commission is keeping the public purposes in mind as they ask us to add these trees and support them with a gravel lot. So, do you want to say anything else about the
They pretty well said it.
Okay. They think it's floody over there, and they need to retain the water to maintain trees, okay? Exceptional circumstances or conditions applying to the property in question or to the intended use of the property that do not apply generally to other properties or classes of uses in the same zone. What is exceptional here? That the Shade Tree Commission would tell us all these things.
Well, that's the part that I personally don't know what the other neighboring properties don't have a water table, and this particular property does, and that's the part we don't know,
Right.
but maybe according to the tree commission, there is one. Because the next
Well-
property's been paved, just recently paved.
Yeah, all we know is that they say they're very concerned about trying to retain rainwater at these sites to promote the growth of trees and the tree canopy of the city of Athens. So it's, the tree commission is just simply interested in getting more trees in the city, and you can't maintain the trees if you have all the water run off, so.
Right, so they weren't necessarily concerned about too much water. They were
I
concerned
think
about
that
sufficient water.
Sufficient water retained. So,
Correct.
yeah.
And
okay.
also drainage maybe, so.
Yeah, okay. So, I'm assuming that it's exceptional enough for them to get involved. Preservation of equal property rights, literal interpretation would deprive the appellant of rights commonly enjoyed by others in the same zone and the same vicinity. While granting a requested variance will not confer on the appellant any special privilege denied to other properties in the zone.
I didn't know how many other properties have gravel parking places, or are they mostly paved or not? I didn't.
I think they're mostly paved.
They're
I
mostly
did a lot of
paved.
paving back
A
there.
lot of them are paved, yeah.
So we will be granting.
And certainly, when this requirement was put in place, I guess we were trying to get rid of all the gravel lots, maybe because they just looked ratty.
Dust, it was dust. I think Sarah Hendeker was
dust,
concerned with the
okay,
dust and the
dust.
pollution, so
Okay.
by
So
adding
now
the
it's
10
like-
feet into the driveway, that cut some of that,
Okay.
trying to get out over that hump of gravel and onto the sidewalk and the curb, but.
But maybe we're going sort of in the other direction and being more
Going green.
careful with our water. Well, we don't have anybody here opposing it at the moment, so is this a minimum variance to make possible the reasonable use of the property?
Yes. And trees.
And trees.
And they are reducing the number of tenants and parking spaces from 7 to 5, so certainly then they are having a minimal impact on that property. Absence of detriment. The variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not materially impair the purpose of the zoning code or the public interest.
No,
That's
ultimately
not-
it will improve.
Perhaps.
Yeah, it sets in the back anyway, and then if he paves in the front of it, I think it should be okay. Shouldn't be any detriment to his neighboring pedestrians or, cars going on the street.
Well, the last issue is this of a so general a nature that we need to change the regulations?
No.
Not everybody is asking for a gravel lot,
Correct.
so far. Okay. So you're ready to vote? So, Ms. Carson, shall we start with you?
I vote yes.
Okay.
I vote no.
Okay. John?
Yes.
Yes.
Greg? Okay, and I will vote yes also. So the motion passes, and you will have a gravel lot with 3 additional trees. that you are obliged to take very good care of.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay, have we got some other business?
Just the minutes. One other thing I want to bring up, you can bring it up before you do the minutes, is next month's meeting would normally fall on Tuesday, November 11th. That's Veterans Day.
Okay.
So I'd like if you guys could email with each other or talk to each other if you want to have an alternate date, if you want to wait until December for the next meeting. You don't have to do it now. I mean, go ahead and figure out what your schedules are. A different day that week. I would assume that that Monday, the day before that, the council would be meeting, so probably these chambers would not be available. But I'll leave it up to you guys to decide if you want to have an alternate date for the meeting in November, or if you want to wait. But just go ahead and figure it out amongst yourselves and let me know in the next 2 or 3 days.
Okay, I don't think we have everybody's email, so,
What was that day? Veterans Day?
yeah.
The 11th.
Is this observed anywhere? I mean,
Well, I guess I'm
School,
st-
I mean, we have,
The city will be closed.
the city will be
City will be
closed, oh, okay.
closed, okay, so, do you have any comments about the dates right now?
I may have a meeting on the following Wednesday, but I'm not sure, because then we're coming up on Thanksgiving, and I think the next week is Thanksgiving, and so I think we were moving a meeting around, but I'm not sure, I'll have to check.
Do you know how many cases we already have for next month?
We have one case right now. The woman originally was going to have the case heard tonight, but she was going to be out of town, so she asked 2 or 3 weeks ago to have hers continued until November. I could
Can
talk
we
with
take-
her again and see if she's insistent on it having to be November, or if she could wait till December. I'll let you guys know by the end of the week.
Yeah, early part of it, November, I won't be here. I will be out of town, so.
When will you
Well,
be out
just
of town?
let
Yeah.
me know, and we'll figure out something. And then the only other thing is the minutes.
Okay.
It was fine to me, I read them.
Response.
What is that?
Yes,
Yes, fine.
minutes fine? Good.
Fine.
So I move that we approve the minutes as presented. Second?
Second.
Okay, thanks. All right, I guess we're adjourned.
Yeah.